I don't know. I don't understand why God would go halfway. You know, it's either write the Bible and have it all be like the perfect book of morality, or don't. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like
Oh, you think that like God's
that's what
making
I
it half better? Like you think he's like making it half better as opposed to all better? Is that what you're saying?
that's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying. I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but
So yeah,
all right.
tell me what you really wanted to talk about. I'm assuming it's things in the Bible, right?
Yes, yes. I think you know exactly where
Me.
I'm probably going. I just wanted to get the kind of the definitions out of the way just to see where your thoughts were, where my thoughts were, and then we can just kind of dig into it a little bit.
That sounds great. Yeah.
All right. So, in the Bible, there's quite a few things that are a big yikes, or at least
That's funny.
yeah, they're a big yikes.
I never heard it was that before. I love that. It's funny. Carry on.
All right, so I'm just going to start out by I'll just read this quote. I believe this is the King James version. I don't know which one you prefer.
That's absolutely fine. Can you, anything. Can you just give me the chapter of the book you're reading, though, of course?
Shoot, I don't remember.
It's all right if you say it. If you just say it, I can find it.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property.
Yep, this one. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you have heard this
Very
one.
much so. And I have loads of notes on it, actually. But I have to kind of bring them up. So I have them right here. Okay. Um, so I probably won't give the best arguments because I don't think I have the most up-to-date notes. However, when I did have some really good notes, and it did kind of pick it apart, and I think it did debunk it pretty decently. But right now, I'm not fully armed. I didn't understand. But hey, I'll give it my best shot. Okay, I'll give it my best shot. So,
All right.
um, uh, the word slave in Hebrew is ibed. Okay, it's ibed, and it's normally translated slave in the KJV, which is what you read from. However,
Mm-hmm.
because firstly, this kind of puts a picture in your mind as like some sort of like African American man tied to a ship, and he's like crying and he can't escape, and the white people are ha 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 laughing at him. So that's what that puts a picture in your mind. But the Greek, the Hebrew word ibed is translated slave, but that's because it was translated during KJV times. It actually, most cases as well, it means servant. So it's more of a servant. So like, it's a less harsher word than slave. Slave's a very harsh word. So
You mind if I interrupt you for a moment? Well, I guess I just did, so I guess it's
no, no,
okay.
go ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
Okay.
I love you to do that. Go ahead.
All right. I will give you that perhaps servant might be a more appropriate word. I'll be willing to give you that, even though I perhaps might disagree.
So how would you
But
agree if the Greek the Greek lexicons state that it means servant as well?
uh, uh,
Or sorry, the Hebrew lexicons. I apologize.
just because of the word slave is used quite a few times, and I know it's because of the translation. Totally understand that.
Mhm.
But in a lot of the other verses, it's where people are just bought and sold. So I don't. It's iffy at best for
So
me.
I see where you're coming from. You think that okay, fine, the Hebrew word might mean servant, but you think that the context around the word kind of indicates it's more of a harsher thing. Is that what you're trying to say?
Correct. Yes.
I got you. I understand that. We'll get into that.
Okay. And then where I was going with it, though, I'll even give you that for now, anyways, and we can get back to that if need be.
Cool, cool.
But is it okay to beat your servant as long as they don't die?
So that's an interesting point that you mentioned. So what I'd like to do is talk about the context here. Back in the context,
Okay.
slavery was rampant. It really was. And they were mistreated horribly. They were mistreated absolutely horribly. But what God does is He likes to. I mean, and don't 100% quote me on this, but this is pretty much what I've looked at and researched, and I do think it's correct. Is that God will take the culture of a time and make it more holy. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean a guy gets beat is holy? We'll get to that. But firstly, is that He likes to take the culture of the time and make it more of a godly, more of a holy, moral thing. So, for instance, the slaves back then, they would be tortured. They would be killed. Some of them would absolutely torment their servants. It'd be horrible. Way worse than the African American times back 200 years ago or something like that. Maybe 300 years ago. So what God does is He takes that and makes it more holy and more of a godly thing. And so there's many verses in the Old Testament when you said about beating him. Is it okay to beat a servant? Well, the Bible says that if the damage is as much as someone losing a tooth or even a nail or something like that, then I believe the owner of the servant has to be punished or something like that, or the owner of the slave has to be punished, or the slaves let go. So think about this. You have say you were to look at this verse back then and say, okay, I can beat my slave. Yeah, he spills water on you, and you slap him, and you put like a really bad mark on him, and he loses his tooth. Well, from there you lost your servant, and you're going to get punished. I think you can get punished by death as well yourself in the Jewish law. So God does not want these servants to be hurt by any means of the word. In fact, they were very protected, and loads of laws were there to protect them. There's loads of scriptures to show that. So that it's not like the atheist argument is, and again, interrupt me anytime. The atheist argument is, oh yeah, you can beat your slaves for a couple of days till he dies, let him breathe, beat him till he dies, let him breathe. But that's not true at all. If he even loses a tooth, or he just has like a little, like he lost a nail or something like that, I think it's tooth or nail, or maybe even something less than that. I think there's a scripture for it. I can give it to you. Then the slave is set free, or the person dies.
Okay. I'm gonna come back to when you were saying that God makes certain times where bad things are happening and He makes it a little bit more holy. Yeah. Right. I'm gonna come back to that. Yeah. So I'm not gonna forget about that. Yeah. But your last part where you said, so like a tooth for a tooth, right? That's kind of the spiel, I suppose.
That's like the Moses. That's not more of a. Well, Moses did say that, but that's not the one I'm quoting. I think it talks about slaves, and it's if you hurt him to that point, then either the guy owner gets punished or the slave gets set free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. I was thinking of the wrong verse.
That's okay. That's right.
But so is that a contradiction then? Because it says, but they are not to be punished, but then the other verse says, well, they are to be punished.
No.
Which one do you follow?
No, because this one is saying if you hit them. Wait, so is it saying if you hit them, the owner's not to be punished, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it says anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. And then it goes on to say, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two.
Exactly. If he recovers after a day or two, and he doesn't, and if you link it to the other scripture, if he doesn't lose a tooth or that type of damage. So, for instance, it's not a contradiction. It's just there's another piece to it. There's another piece to the puzzle. So it's one, if he recovers, they're not to be punished. And if he does not lose a tooth or this other part or something like that, like his nail or something like that, then he's also not to be punished. However, if he loses that nail or if he loses a tooth, he's set free or the other guy's punished. If he doesn't recover, the other guy's punished as well. So that's not a contradiction.
It seems like someone reading this could get really confused super easy. Like, couldn't God put it in more plain out there? I don't know.
It was written in Hebrew initially, and it would be more clearer in Hebrew. So it's like this. If I said, all right, Pierce, feed my... okay, if my friend gets on your nerves, like, this is something... But again, we have to think of this as from Old Testament times. We'll never do this now, and I'll get onto the culture thing in a bit, because the culture changes a lot of things. But again, think that you're in these cultures. Don't think you're in modern day times. Think that you're in like 3000 BC, and you had a servant. And I said, all right, Pierce, if he does something really bad, you can hit him, but if he loses a tooth, then he's free and you're punished. If he is really severely hurt and he can't recover, you're punished. Or if he dies, you're punished. So it's just basically 3 rules there. I mean, how is that confusing?
Okay, I'm not convinced that that's what it meant, but for the sake of the argument, I will grant you that one.
Sure.
But I don't think I can grant you the think in those times terms, and this is why.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Because morality, is it dependent on what time you live in?
I would say it's not. However, I would say that the culture, or God uses the culture to adapt. He basically uses his morality and he puts it into the culture. So, for instance, let's assume this is a very bad thing. Let's assume Nazi Germany took over the whole world and it's dodgy stuff going on. God could use that culture and make it more better. So he could say, don't mistreat Jews, or don't do this and that. Because he would just take the culture and make it more of a godly version. So I'm not saying that morality changes over time. I'm saying that if we think in those times, we will be brought up in those times, and we would be brought up to think that, slavery is just a normal thing. I mean, we would think that. But it is, like, when we think of slavery, again, tying someone up and all this other business, that's wrong in my opinion. I think that in the biblical term, that's wrong too, because it's not that. It's just someone coming around and doing tasks like a cleaner would if you hired a cleaner. I mean, there's not much of a difference. Of course, you can't hit the cleaner, but we'll get to that in a minute. But pretty much, that's the only difference there, I'd say.
I don't know. I don't understand why God would go halfway. It's either write the Bible and have it all be like the perfect book of morality, or don't. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like,
oh, you think that God's making it half better? Like, you think he's like making it half better as opposed to all better? Is that what you're saying?
That's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying. I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but that's what I'm getting.
Right. No, so I would say that, for instance, when you say half better, actually, I'll first ask that. When you say half better, like, can you go into that for a second?
Sure. So we talked about the culture and how slavery was so rampant. You even gave the example, if Nazi Germany had taken over the world, perhaps he could, throw some things out there to make that a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, I take it your view is probably that God is all powerful, correct?
He is.
Why not use some of that power to, like, let's say Nazi Germany took over the entire world.
Sure.
Why not be all powerful and either not let that happen in the first place, or once it happens, just snap his fingers and all will be well?
Well, that ties into Alvin Plantage's free will defense, in the sense that God is so loving, he's going to give laws, and if you disagree with those laws, then fair play. But because he gives us a choice, he could easily click his fingers and turn everyone into glass. But the reason he doesn't do that is because he has this love and respect for free will. So, for instance, if you had a son and you wanted him to go on walks, to obey you, in a loving way, like you take care of him, you love him, you keep him away from like drugs and all this sort of stuff. And he says, Dad, I want to do drugs. You're like, no, son, don't do that. And eventually he keeps pushing. You let him go his own way. In other words, you don't force him. You don't tie him to the chair and say, listen, son, no drugs for you. I mean, you do that a couple times. I mean, the Bible does say that the God will try his best to, without intervening your free will, try to keep you from doing those things. But if you keep rebelling, he's going to say, all right, he wants this free will, go ahead. And so, in other words, with Nazi Germany, stuff like that, he can interfere with free will, but does he chooses not to, simply to respect people's decisions.
Are you sure that he always respects those decisions?
There are times in the Bible where he did interfere with free will, but that's only for specific instances to bring through the Messiah. So generally, and that would override some free will. Although, to be fair, I guess in some cases you could argue that that he's still done it in a free will way. Like, so for instance, he'd still done it in a free will way. He just influenced environment. But regardless of that fact, he's in some specific instances he would only to bring through the Messiah, which is the most important thing. So he would for that. But any other reason, generally, he will respect the decisions of people so that they can choose good or evil.
I was actually referring to the Great Flood.
That was a okay. So I like to talk about that. That's actually not as hard as some other passages, because that is just, if you look at the Bible says it's like everyone was so evil, and so in other words, they got to a point where they were so evil, God just judged them earlier, because the Bible believes that all people who do good or bad are going to be judged, but all God did was judge them earlier than he would have normally. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Did you get what I said about the flood thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did. I don't know that was. I think you answered a question I didn't ask.
Well, you said what about the
which
flood?
Is okay.
Like, what about the flood? Because God intervened in the flood, right?
Right.
And
Right.
It's like you're arguing that he got rid of their free will. But my point is, I'm not saying he got rid of their free will. I'm saying that they got to a point where God's authorized judgment earlier than he would have anyway.
I guess I wasn't necessarily arguing against free will per se. I mean, maybe that. I mean, I guess that could encompass it. Perhaps that could be an option.
I thought you were arguing against that God can't intervene against free will. So you're trying to give an example that he could. And I'm trying to say that it's just all he did was he just did what he was going to do quicker. In other words. And the reason why is because they already reached a certain amount of evil where he was to do it. So they already abused their free will to an utmost point where he's just had enough of it. In other words.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. So there's a certain level of morality threshold. Is that what you're getting at?
Back then there was, although of course God promised he wouldn't flood the world again. But if NASA flood the world now, he would just, in theory, let them have their free will. He'd obviously be very angry at it. He would hate it, but then he would judge them after they died. Yeah.
Almost taking a step forward beyond this. And I almost hate to do it, but I think I will.
Go ahead.
It's totally irrelevant to what we just talked about, but with regards to the Great Flood, the population wasn't huge, right? But it was probably pretty big, right?
I mean, there's not enough evidence to suggest that. We don't know. I mean, would you, unless you have?
Okay. I mean, we're talking more than a few thousand people, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, with regards to a few thousand people, do you think that there must have been at least a handful of people who weren't too bad of people?
Well, what do you call it? Noah was trying to tell people to bring bring all the nice people on the ark. But the Bible says, if we're going to presuppose the Bible's presuppose the Bible's truth about the flood in the first place, we have to presuppose what it says about it. And it says that Noah and his family were the only righteous people on the earth at the time. I mean, we can't just say that the flood happened, but the Bible's wrong about that. It's either wrong about both or it's right about both. So I would say...
I don't think you can make that assumption.
Well, I was also going to say the Bible says that Noah offered to take people on, take people on the boat, and they never seen rain before. Like, we see rain all the time, but these people never seen rain before. Rain to them is equivalent of us seeing fire from the sky now. It's something that was never seen before. So he was saying, "Come on the boat. It's going to rain. It's going to flood." And they were like, "Ha ha ha!" And they kept mocking him. And so they would mock him. And in fact, it says all of them. None. So if they were really good, they wouldn't even mock him. They'll just be like, "No, I don't want to." But they didn't. They just mocked him. They insulted him. And so it kind of shows all of the actually, it also describes all of the evil that people did. They killed worse than you could imagine now. It says almost all of them. And you could argue were their babies at the time. So again, I'm playing advocate against my own position here. Do you want me
I was going there anyway.
Yeah, cool. So babies, right? Now, there's loads of stuff about this. My position is this. Obviously, God, he loves babies, and it's evidence through the New Testament. Jesus blessed the little ones. He said if anyone offends little ones, it would be better for them for a millstone to go around their neck and be thrown into the sea. He loves little ones so much. In fact, he gives an angel that sees the Father to protect them. Of course, presupposing biblical truth. I'm not saying you believe this. I'm just saying...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, obviously.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I don't believe that, yeah.
Obviously you don't believe that, but I'm just giving a presupposition to show that God presupposedly loves children. Does that make sense? Before I answer it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of contradictions in the Bible, but I understand what you're saying. You can continue.
Cool. We can get to contradictions one time too. I think that'll be fun. But anyway, so yeah, God does love them very much. Anyway, about the babies that were killed then. So, firstly, the death for us, when someone dies, what we see is we see them coming out of existence completely. However, with a child death, right? With a child death, all that's happening is God is moving them from one plane of existence to another plane of existence. And God doesn't want to do this either. God doesn't necessarily want to do this either. I'm just saying when it does happen, all he's doing is taking someone. It's like me moving you from the room you're in to a different room, to a better room, to an infinitely better room. So in other words, it's not just a transfer of existence of planes. It's transfer from one existence of plane to an infinitely better existence of plane. And also, there's evidence to suggest that. I think Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy gave that some babies, especially kids and stuff, when they're very young, they don't remember pain past 4. In fact, I could not remember any pain when I was 2 or 3. I'm not sure if you can, but so there's also evidence to suggest that. So you have moving of planes to one plane to an infinitely better plane, and also the pain thing.
I understand that. I understand that children aren't going to remember pain. I certainly don't remember pain. You don't remember pain. I'm sure my wife doesn't remember pain when she was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. But the pain did exist, and at that time, you did feel that pain, and that pain was very real to you. I'm sure that if you were experiencing pain, like if you're going to the doctor and getting a vaccine or something, and they stuck the needle in your arm, it was likely that you felt that, and you possibly cried. And I, like... all these babies that were, I'll use the word killed. I think that's the most appropriate. But, they were in the water. They were drowning. They felt that pain, at least even if it was only temporary and probably relatively quick. But they did feel that pain. Couldn't God have just snapped his fingers and transported them either to the ark or even to that other plane, which I'm assuming you're talking about, heaven?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say 2 things on that. I would say that with the pain thing, I think that, and I think there's a couple of studies on it, but I'll have to find it, so don't quote me 100% on this. But I think that children, and evolutionarily, they feel pain, but they don't feel it the way we feel it, because of course babies can't move as much as we can. So I think they feel some form of like light pain. But the more you grow, the more you're moving. And so you need to feel more pain to make you survive more. But babies, if they felt a lot of pain, it's not going to be very efficient because they can't move around. So I think there's some evidence suggests that their nerves aren't developed as us, and so they don't feel the same pain we feel. And so in other words, you could argue it is equivalent to that because they didn't feel it like we would.
I've never heard of that, but I'll grant you it. I assume that there is at least some truth to it.
Yeah.
But I don't see the relevance.
The brain isn't even fully developed, so even like the pain receptors might not even be fully developed. And so it's literally the equivalent of moving someone from one room to an infinitely better room.
But the process of moving that person was a painful death. Or, maybe a light... maybe I'll grant you perhaps it's not a super painful death. Perhaps because it's an infant, it's unpleasant death. I'm gonna take the stance that some pain was felt. I think you are taking that stance as well?
Yes, I would say a little bit of pain, probably a little bit, but I would also give.
All right, I'm gonna jump in and interrupt you just for a sec
Go
here.
ahead.
Why is the severity in it? Why does the severity of the pain matter?
I would say I would say the severity matters. I would say more pain is uh, more of a damaging thing, or more of like a worse thing. So, for instance, hell is the most painful. I mean, if in theory, if you were to presuppose biblical truth, not that, or biblical, or the Bible, a sin requires hell, which is the worst pain. So, if pain didn't really matter in terms of morality, then hell would either be barely painful or very painful. But the fact that it's the most painful shows that really bad things are punished by really painful stuff. So, less pain could equal to more moral, in other words.
Correct, more moral, but not necessarily moral.
Well, though, to be fair, think about it like this. When I go to the gym and lift stuff, I feel pain. You know, sometimes I feel a lot of pain. Sometimes I want to cry, but I do it to build muscle. And these babies, they felt like we don't really know, but like according to the studies, not that much at all. And they went to an infinitely better place, infinitely better. I'm not like infinitely better plane of existence. Like they changed from one room just to feel a little bit of pain, and they went to an incredible place that's infinitely better, more than building some muscles on your thighs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll even, just for the sake of argument, let's pretend that they had zero pain.
Sure.
No pain whatsoever.
Yeah.
Do you think they were scared?
When I was, I don't remember being scared when I was young. Do you?
No, but I'm sure when, like, let's say I was exactly 2 years old. When I was 2 years old, and let's say 1 minute after that, I was just absolutely petrified, scared out of my life. At 2 hours and 20 minutes, did I remember that? Perhaps.
Right. So I don't even know if there was time for them to feel scared. I mean, they would die very quickly. They wouldn't know what's going on. They don't know what a flood is.
Right, but I'm sure their parents were probably at least attempting to save them. It probably was a pretty traumatic experience.
Sure, but I mean, they wouldn't really know what's going on, though. I mean, they might. The thing is, like, they wouldn't really know what's going on. I mean, scared. I haven't actually heard of that. I mean, if they're like 1 or 2 years old, being scared. I mean, that's something that.
What about 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old?
Of course, when you go up the ages, then fear definitely comes in. I do remember being scared when I was 6.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the fear does definitely come in. I would say that's an interesting point, and I would say that with the fear of the emotional pain, you could argue that, like we could just add it to emotional pain. So we could just say that they felt emotional pain. You class it as emotional pain, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. They felt a little bit of emotional pain, but then they were again transferred to an infinitely better plane of existence. So I think, to be fair, again, like we all feel emotional pain, or we all risk emotional pain in many things in life. Like, for instance, let me give a good example here. When we go to a competition, is a bad example. I should have thought of a better one. When we go to a competition, we really want to win, but we risk the emotional pain of actually getting humiliated in front of everyone. But we do it on purpose. We go there on purpose. And so with this one, there is emotional pain, but there's also infinitely better plane of existence after, if you know what I mean. But people risk emotional pain and go through emotional pain willingly on purpose all the time. You know what I mean? So heartbreak is a big one. You know, people willingly ask girls out and stuff that they feel so much feelings for, and know that they could get rejected, and actually go through it because they put themselves in that situation. They don't have to. So I think it's just.
But they choose to do that.
They do choose to do that, exactly. And that's my point, is that they choose to do that. So all God is doing is they're just feeling some, but they would have chose to do 10. Like if that kid lived through life, he would have caused 10,000 times more emotional pain to himself. But all God did was just make him feel a little bit and transfer him to an infinitely better place. To be fair, if people could feel that pain those kids felt for heaven, I'm pretty sure millions of people would go through it. Like, I'm pretty sure millions of people would pay to go through it because they want to go to heaven. You know what I mean? And
I agree with that. But I guess I want to boil this down to one question here. So, and I guess you can either tell me whether you agree or disagree. So, God could have just snapped his fingers or whatever kind of action you want to say, and the babies, the 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, whoever, could have been just instantly transferred to another plane. You think that's a possibility, correct?
To be fair, with the babies and stuff, because they don't really they have free will, but they don't really have like they can't really make proper decisions. So with them, they have free will, but they don't have a free will that is considered a authoritative free will. Does that make sense? Like, they don't really have true free will. Does that make sense? So, like,
they don't have like a conscious free will kind of. Exactly. Yeah.
So with that one,
okay,
you could argue that you could say, Jamie, they don't really have a free will. Then why can't God just transfer them to heaven? Why does it? So, with that one, to be fair, that is one thing I don't really know why. Like, God just wanted to put them through that. But again, we're only answering from a perfectly moral standpoint. And I'll just say that little bit of emotional pain in relation to a different plane of existence that is infinitely better, and at the same time, loads of people put themselves through worse pain to get like muscles or competition or a girlfriend and stuff like that, shows that people are willing to put themselves through lots of pain, and all God did was put them through the similar amount for something infinitely better.
So I guess your argument is kind of like the means justify the ends.
Sure. Yeah. Also, what would you say to this argument? I didn't use this argument because I didn't really want to, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's interesting.
Okay.
Now, I would never argue this because it's very emotionally bad, and God does not think this way. But say, okay, you know what? Maybe actually, let me take an example that God does think, right? And we don't really know why 100% He did it, but He did, right? With the babies and that, with the flood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So He could have transferred them. We don't know why He didn't, but I think the means justify the ends. But it's more so than that. This is the other argument, the test argument. In philosophy, God will be defined as like the moral. I think I'm right here. The moral ontological condition. So in other words, He is the fundamental source of all that is good and bad. Or sorry, not of all that is good and bad. Sorry, of all that is good, and all that is bad is a side effect of what is against Him. So in other words, all that is good is founded in Him, and because He is this moral ontological condition, it means that any decision He makes is perfectly moral. So even if it's a decision we hate, it's perfectly moral. And you could say, no, that's wrong, but if God was real, and if He was the moral ontological condition, if morality was found in Him, we can't really say anything against it. It's the equivalent of like a criminal in court saying against the judge, no, I'm free, I'm not a criminal. But it's not gonna work. So, what would you say to that? I'm not saying God's a dictator and He's going against morality. I'm saying that if morality was all found in Him, every decision He make would be good, and we couldn't do anything about that. It would be good by nature, by higher emergent properties. It would be good.
Pre-assuming God exists and is the
condition,
assuming all those things, I don't know that I can make an argument.
So I didn't want to make an argument with every single thing you use because I felt like it's not a cop out, but it doesn't satisfy me. And me as a debater, I don't want to just say an argument. I want it to satisfy me in my mind because, like you say, we need to have these discussions. We need to really get down to it, and I learn a lot from you. So the reasons I gave about this planes to existence thing, because I want to satisfy my mind as well. So you could take any murder in the Bible, not murder, killing. I'd say murder is a different word. But you say kill any killing that God did or commanded in the Bible, and you could apply the argument about him being the moral ontological condition. And technically, if the Bible's true, if he exists, we can't argue against the morality because he is the source of it. We have no basis.
Right. I just think I think you're putting, like, I don't. What's a good example? Let me think of an example.
Go ahead.
Like, ugh. Like if we are trying to prove if aliens are real, and we assume that in wherever that in Las Vegas or wherever that UFO landing area supposedly.
Sure.
If we assume that that's real and that was UFOs, then we have to assume that aliens are real. I think it's just like taking the assumption too far. It's like making an assumption that we don't know for sure,
Well, that
and putting it
that
forward.
wouldn't work because if we're trying to say that God is immoral, we have to presuppose that God actually did do those things. But while we do that, it's just a contradiction. If we presuppose God exists, he automatically is the moral ontological condition because morality is founded in him. So if it's not, then I would say God couldn't exist. I would say the only way God could exist fundamentally and philosophically would be for him to be that.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess in a sense. I mean, I guess I'm taking a subjective morality. I can't get my head out of subjective morality. Like, I'm stuck there. But I guess...
Sorry to interrupt you. That's why I don't use this argument, because it doesn't satisfy me. Like, I always argue for my subjectivism. Like, I for instance, like, if I think God, he would never do this, but if God just took someone and shot them, this doesn't make any damn sense, but if God took someone and shot them, and he said, look, I'm the moral ontological condition, this is moral, this is good, I couldn't say anything to that. Like, I can't show it's actually moral. So if God did that, it would be 100% good. But the reason I don't use that is because I argue for my subjectivism and say, wait, that doesn't feel right. But that's baseless. But I still don't use it because I want to satisfy me too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Holy crap. You know what? Yes. You know... Oh man. Like, that's like my whole point. Like, man, I don't... I'm sorry, you just kind of caught me off guard with what you said there. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Man.
The argument does, the conclusion is still, even if God did do that, we couldn't argue against it. Like, there's literally nothing we could do to challenge his morality. Like, it would be objectively, like 1 + 1 is 2, him shooting that person is good, because he would be the moral ontological condition. We can't do, but like I said before, it's just my mind and how I feel about it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think I understand. I don't know. You got me kind of speechless. You got me in a thought.
Sure.
That's like, it's going around in my head on a carousel. It's just like, it's just going around and around. Like,
it sounds like we smoked like a kilo of weed or something.
Kind of. No, okay. I'm gonna ask you. I got my list of things here, just to kind of keep me on track. And we've only gone through 2 of the like 10 things, and we're never gonna make it through all of them, and that's okay. But I want to talk about one specific one and hear your thoughts on it, and then we can go back round.
Great.
And we can talk about what you just said. Remember what you just said. I'm going to ask you to repeat it. Okay.
Sure.
So I don't know which verse this is. I guess I should have marked it down for you, because I bet you're going to ask me. But the verse that reads, "Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord."
Sure.
Now that one, to most people, I think, or at least to many people, it would mean wives are to treat their husbands as they are to treat them like God.
No. I would not say that. I mean, it does say.
Okay.
It does say, because obviously God is only God. Like, and no, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I would say.
What's your take?
So, like, respect them. In other words, in the other word,
Respect
in
them.
another verses, wives, husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husband. So I would just say it's just a form of respect. Like
Okay.
if the husband is saying something, and the wife is saying something, and the wife could do something, but she knows in her heart, the husband, she could just submit to him, respect him, and say, I won't do that. Something like that. That's all it is.
Okay.
And also because of that,
Us-
in Ephesians 5:21, it says submit to one another. So the husband has to submit to the wife too, to something.
You make a fair point.
Yeah.
I will graciously move on and agree with you. Hopefully that is what he meant. Caprice, assuming. Okay, I'm gonna try to give a better example because I do want to have my overall point made. Hopefully I can make it.
Sure.
The story of Job. I'm sure you are familiar with that one.
The story of Job.
Yes, Job.
Right.
Whomever.
Sorry, you said Job, I said Job. Right, it's accent thing. Yeah, no, I get you. Yep.
Yeah. Wata.
Yeah.
Whichever.
Tomato. Yeah.
Yep. So he did some pretty bad things to Job. Like, dang, I feel sorry for the homie. You know what I mean?
I feel sorry for the homie too, but I will say this: he didn't really do them. He allowed it to happen. But you could argue that's semantics, but we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
he didn't really do them. He allowed it because the devil pretty much begged God or asked God to do it. Please let me do this and show him that he's not a good servant. So show you, sorry, that he's not a good servant. And God said, okay, fine. But the reason why is, I think, for multiple reasons. One is, well, for the sake of argument, I'm not going to use the moral ontological condition argument here because then, I want to actually answer it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that I'm not saying the moral ontological condition doesn't answer it. I think it's a really good argument, but I want to actually answer it for the sake of our own minds. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I'll do it
appreciate it.
for our minds. So for this one is God did initially. He said, okay, you can hurt him a little bit, but don't hurt him fully. Like God only did it in levels, and also God knows what Job can take, and so He knows because the Bible says something like, you can't suffer beyond what God knows, or something like that, or like God knows what you can suffer, so He doesn't make you suffer beyond that, something like that. So God knew what he could suffer and what time. And it was just to test him to see if he was faithful to him. And of course, God knows the future. He knows that they would be faithful to him. But I guess here's another angle. The context of Job is that back in those times, they saw God as a vending machine, as like a genie where if you're good, you get what you want. If you're not, you don't. That's why throughout Job, all of his friends said, you must have sinned, because they always think that if you sin, something bad happens. If you do good, good happens. But Job is saying, look, man, I didn't do anything wrong. Why is this happening to me? And God wanted to show them a lesson, to basically teach him not a horrible lesson, but it does feel horrible. But you know what I mean. It's not out of anger. It's out of just a lesson to teach him and say, look, even if you do good, you can still suffer. And that's the main lesson there. And on top of all that, after God confronted him, God renewed to him tenfold or something what he's lost. God just wanted to teach him, if you do good, it doesn't mean you're going to get good back.
Okay. So it's kind of like when your parents say life isn't fair.
Exactly. Like it's like your parent. It's like a kid thinking that if I don't know. Let me think of a good example here. It's like a kid thinking going to his dad and telling his dad, I did something good today, give me £5. He's like, all right. Or $5, should I say. He's like, all right.
I know what pounds are.
Yeah, cool. $5. And he's like, okay, son, here you go. And he does another 10 good things. All right, Dad, give me $50. He's like, all right. And then the third time, he's like, all right, no $50. In fact, you have to go to your room right now and do your chores. And he's like, wait, what? He's like, and eventually after he does that, he says, no, he does do your chores again and again and again. He's like, but Dad, I did all these good things. He's like, look, son, I want to teach you that even if you do good things in life, you're not going to get good back in return. all the time. Life, like you say, life isn't fair. And it's basically after that, it's like the dad gives him like $500 or $5,000 just as like a well done kind of thing. And that's literally what God did. He taught him the lesson and gave him 10 times more after. And thirdly, he didn't do it. The devil wanted to do it. Just to clarify. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
I'm sorry. I mean, I understand the argument. I don't know.
I know. You think it's like, come on, God's all powerful. How can he? I get that, but it's just God didn't do it directly. He just allowed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. About that, like, I don't know. I mean, apparently he taught Job a lesson.
Sure.
But since Job was he was such a great little Christian, right? He would do anything that God
righteous
says.
Man, yeah. But through the motivation
Right.
is because God was a genie. In other words.
Yeah. Couldn't have God just have said like, hey, listen, buddy. Sometimes life isn't fair, and then he would have been like, "Yup, I got you, homie. We good," instead of doing all these bad things, because he would have listened to anything he said.
Well, that's a good point, and I think that's a good question. Why didn't God do that? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But he did it for a reason, and maybe it's harder hitting. Maybe if the dad made the kids do the chores, it really has to set in. If the dad just said, when you tell your kids something, or I don't know if you have kids, but I don't have kids either. But when you tell someone something like, "Don't do this, it's bad," and like, yeah, and they do it anyway. But when they actually experience it, they know. It's like I don't know what the word is. It's like once I got arrested. And there's like little facts about me. I actually got arrested once. Did you know that?
Okay.
Well, you wouldn't know that, would you?
No, I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, I might have blurred it out sometime. Well, before that, I would always see people get arrested, like, it's not that bad. Yeah, it's bad to get arrested. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. And I did something stupid. I tried to impress my friends at school, so I brought in a knife. And long story short, I showed it to my friends in the toilet or in a cubicle, and he held it.
I'm sorry. In a toilet, in a cubicle? It's just a matter of language. I know exactly what you mean. But that sounds so funny to me. I imagine this like toilet in like an office cubicle where there's like a desk and a computer, and then there's just this toilet sitting there. I'm sorry.
To be fair, it was like that. Just take out the desk and the office and the chair, but it's pretty much like an office cubicle with a toilet in it.
Your bathrooms are way fancier than ours. Ours are like a concrete prison toilets. That's what our public bathrooms are like.
That's funny, right? But basically, yeah, so he held it in this little cubicle, and he said, "Oh man, that's an interesting knife." And he done me dirty, bro. He got that knife and he threw it under the other cubicle where someone was taking the number 2. And then this other dude was like, "Oh crap, it's a knife!" And I got into damn trouble, mate. I couldn't save myself, mate. I was running, but they caught me, and I got arrested. Anyway. When I got arrested, I was like, crap, being arrested is horrible. I'm never doing that again. But before that, I said, okay, I knew it's bad, but I'll get away. It's like when I experienced it, it was 10,000 times more harder hitting. And so maybe God was just saying, all right, let's make it more harder hitting. Let's actually make him experience this.
I would get it. I think that would be a super, 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 super good argument if Job had actually done something wrong.
But then that would just disprove his point then, because he's trying to say that even when you do good, you're not going to get right. So like if he done something wrong, then that will kind of prove that won't debunk the vending machine that God's trying to debunk.
That is true.
Yeah.
But he also didn't do anything wrong.
He
I don't know.
10 times, he got 10 times back. It's like that's like God saying you did do good, so we're going to just give you 10 times more, but we just wanted to show you this thing. That's what it is. What's your thoughts?
All right.
Conclusion on that? What's your conclusion on
that? I don't know. I think it was a dick move. I'm sorry.
I guess people could think that, but then if I add the condition thing, the moral ontological condition, we can't really say it was. We can think it is, but it isn't actually in reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. If you add that which I'm going to call an assumption. Yeah, totally. But I can't buy into that one just because I can't.
It's inextricable from God's nature. If God wasn't all good, if he wasn't the source of all good, then he'd either be good and bad or all evil. and both can't work. Why? Because of this. If he's good and bad, he's the source of contradiction. He's basically a contradictory entity of good and evil at the same time. He would be thinking do all good and do all bad at the same time. Humans can be bad and good, but they're not the fundamental source of it. He would have to be that, and he would contradict himself. So he can't be good and bad. He can't be all evil, because if he was, he would be maximally selfish, and therefore none of us would exist. So therefore he has to be all good. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't mean to offend you at all, but you're kind of losing me. It seems like a lot of assumptions are being made.
But like, how can it? Okay, so you have to show how it's an assumption though, because I'm saying that if he was, it's not offensive, man. Trust me, man. You can say it how it is. We're discussion, and I respect everything you say. So don't worry about that. But
perhaps I can throw out an example that might make it easier for me to explain.
Go ahead.
Because so let's say I'm going to give an alien example. So
sure.
Let's say there's for some reason I'm on aliens today, but whatever.
I was already as well.
So let's say we're here, our puny Earthlings. We're just chilling.
Mm-hmm.
We're just chilling, you know. And this super mothership comes up from above, right? And they are not infinitely, but they're a lot smarter than us. They're so technologically advanced, it's just kind of unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So they come down, and everybody basically thinks they're God. They pretty much are gods to us. But they're not necessarily all good or all bad. They're just they're beings. They're things that have life, right?
Mm-hmm. 1 second.
But they're basic. Sorry.
Sorry about that, man. Carry on.
All right. So then we would say that they're gods, right?
Well, I guess you could argue we would think that, yeah.
Right. So I set this example up in a very poor fashion, and that I do.
Are you trying to say that we'll assume they're gods when they're not, or something like that?
No, I meant to set them up as gods.
Okay.
I'm gonna change this.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm going to be God. I am God.
All right. Morgan Freeman, but Pierce instead.
Yes. I would deepen my voice, but I can't. So okay, let's pretend that I'm this very powerful person.
Sure, very powerful. Donald Trump. No, sorry.
Right. So I got this aquarium, and I create a whole new form of life. Okay.
Okay.
It's nothing to do with our existence. It doesn't use oxygen. It doesn't use DNA. It doesn't use RNA. It doesn't use anything that the Christian God had used. It's my own creation. I created it all of my own, all of my powers that I might have, and I created this being, and I put this being into the aquarium, and then the beings reproduced, and they're living all their life and merry good. They're having a good time, right? And I am their God to them. Am I not?
Yeah, sure. You're their creator. Yep.
Am I all good?
No, because you're not. You're a contingent being. You're not a being of necessity, and so therefore you're not the moral ontological condition. If I created a life form right now, if I create some technological, like some say electricity life form, and they think I'm God, I don't know if you played Fallout 4 before, but I've been playing that, and some really genius guy, he makes an incredibly advanced robot that has like a personality and is almost human, and they call him their creator, but they're not. The creator is not all good because he's a human being in the terms of, and what I mean by that is he's not a necessity being. He's just contingent that came in. So in other words, the reason I apply to God is because he is the uncaused cause. In other words, everything has, if he exists, everything has to fall back in him, and that's why, like, he's a fundamental. Like we're not, none of us are fundamental at all. The universe isn't either. I would argue. I would say God is. So if he's a fundamental, all things must be fundamental in him. Therefore, the morality thing.
What does morality have to do with a necessary? I'm sorry. What was the word they used? Necessary being.
Yeah, necessary being, sure.
Yes. Okay.
Well, again, if morality is objective, which I say there is philosophical evidence to suggest it, and not much to suggest it's subjective, I would say that, again, because God is the fundamental thing of all reality, the morality being objective would fundamentally have to be founded in him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be objective. Or founded in something that's fundamental, whether the universe or whatever, but you get my point.
Kind of I do, kind of I don't.
Okay, so tell me what you don't, because I don't want to confuse you. Tell me,
sure.
Zoom in on the part you don't.
Sure. So let's make the assumption that God is I want to say essential worker. I know that. Yeah, God is an essential worker, and I like to keep things light. So you know what? I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to continue saying that just for the memes. Okay.
Essential worker.
So, yep, God is an essential worker. So he's God being the essential worker. Why does he also have to be the objector of morality?
Well,
the source.
Sure, that's because he's, as I said before, I don't want to go too deep into philosophy, but I'll just keep it simple and say, simply because if morality is objective, like physics or stuff like that, it would have to be founded in something. So if it's founded in something, just like laws are founded in the government, because he is the uncaused cause, he's the fundamental thing of all reality, and given if morality was higher emergent properties, it would be founded in him. Otherwise, it would be founded in something else. But if it was founded in something else, well, then basically God wouldn't be able to be God, because he would have no moral. Sorry, 1 second. Just give me 1 second, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that, bro. Sorry. So what was I? Yeah. So if morality wasn't founded in him, because he's the fundamental source of everything, it's kind of like the foundation. It's like the house is founded on the foundation. Morality would be founded in God. And if you say that morality isn't founded on him, then he wouldn't be the foundation. The foundation would be something else, and that's why atheists propose universe or something else, right? So that's the point there.
I guess I feel like your argument is very similar to the God of the Gaps argument. So it's kind of like some wacky thing that we don't know in physics. Some theist will take a look at that and say, okay, this wacky thing is happening, and they're like, that must be God, without any real evidence for that, right?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not arguing because I didn't give evidence for the moral realism argument. So I'm not using the moral realism argument to say God exists via this. I mean, I could, but I would have to argue through evidences from moral philosopher Terence Kuhner, but I'm not going down that road. I'm just trying to say that if we were to presuppose the biblical God exists, I'm trying to say a side effect of that is we'd have to presuppose that morality is founded in him. Otherwise, he would have no moral source to be God in the first place. He would be like me and you.
So to help me better understand, and if this isn't what you're saying, please correct me.
Sure, go far away.
Are you saying that if God exists, then morality cannot be subjective?
100%. I would say that the goodness is founded in him, and yeah, You could argue morality
And
is too, but it's more so the goodness, if that makes sense.
and I guess this is probably this is probably due to my atheism. I obviously don't really understand what it's like to believe in God,
Sure, that's fine.
but I guess I can't make the connection between uh, morality and in God. I mean I know biblically there's that huge connection, obviously in scripture, huge connection, right?
Sure,
But
go ahead, go ahead.
putting that aside, like I don't know I can't make that
So I
connection.
have to say, like I understand that and I respect that. But I'm saying if we're going to try to argue against God's morality from the Bible, we have to, we can't just like we're basically being completely inconsistent because we're trying to say that God is immoral, but we're taking away His power as God in the first place. Like if we want to try to presuppose He exists and presuppose He actually did those horrible acts to argue against a religious person, we have to also know that all goodness is found in Him as well. And if we do that, then the argument falls apart because you can't really argue against any wrong deed because he would be that moral ontological condition.
I guess my thoughts on that are that it's
If it's circular, you have to show how
like
it's circular.
it's maybe not circular would be the best to use, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Go ahead.
You're saying that if one part of the Bible, you're saying either the Bible is true or not, all parts are either true or all parts are not true?
No. I'm saying,
Okay.
I'm saying that if you presuppose God, you have to presuppose His attributes. That's more simply way of saying it. You can't presuppose.
Okay.
You can't presuppose God and say He's not. You can't presuppose God and say He's not like all powerful. You can't presuppose God and say He's not omniscient. And in the same way, you can't presuppose God and say He's not all moral and has moral founded in Him. So when I say all,
Okay.
I'm not saying you have to say He's good. I'm not saying that. You can say, all right, why did God kill? And I'm not saying you can't say that. I'm saying that if you want to presuppose Him, it was inconsistent to presuppose Him without His attributes. And so therefore, if you presuppose Him with His attributes, the argument of killing falls apart because, again, He's that condition and nothing can be technically immoral that He does.
There we have it. This is why we disagree. Because I'm taking the assumption that we don't know what God's attributes are, and you're taking the assumption that we do know what they are.
So no, I would say sure.
No?
We can start there, but I would also say if you want to presuppose from the Bible, you presuppose God. Therefore, why try to take out his attribute that the Bible presupposes too in terms of his in terms of morality is presupposed in Him? Does that make sense?
Yes, I get it. I get what you're saying. So it's like
I have a perfect
all these.
I have a perfect example if you don't mind, unless you can say yours.
Go ahead.
It's like
Well,
say,
I guess let.
go ahead.
Okay, so I guess let me see if we're on the same page here.
Sure.
So from what I understand, is that you're saying all these things that are supposedly horrible that he did, right? I got my list here. If I take all those things and assume those things are true from the Bible, I should also take apart.
And you take away all my other explanations, my specific explanations, and just assume the condition thing. Sure, go ahead.
Right. Assuming that.
Yeah.
And then I also have to take from the Bible that he is the source of morality, and I have to assume that as well.
Yes. Well, the source of all goodness, supposedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's where that's where our disconnect is, I think, because yeah, that's where we are. That's where we're different here. You know what? I'd like to hear your example, if you want.
Sure. It's like us saying that Superman, like we're saying that Superman is right in front of us, like Superman's here and he's standing in his cape, and I get a gun and I shoot him and a bullet goes through him. Wait a minute, that's not Superman. He can get shot. So the same way Superman is bulletproof, in the same sense is that like we can't separate Superman from who he is, and that is his nature of bulletproofness. And in the same sense, we can't separate God from his nature, that is all powerfulness, the fundamental source of reality, and therefore the fundamental source of morality.
Okay. Okay, I have an example too. Okay, and I think a lot of our disconnect is where I'm assuming that there could be things in the Bible that are not true, and you obviously have a different stance than that.
But my argument even goes that God cannot exist or be God unless He's the source of all goodness. And I did give some philosophical arguments for that, though. And that's like God will be a logical contradiction unless He was all good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I do.
Like He would be like a square circle if He wasn't all good, or if He was a mix between good and bad. And I gave some arguments for that. But anyway, carry
on. Yeah, and maybe what you just said kind of rebuttals what I'm about to say, but I suppose I can say it anyway. So with your Superman example, so you got Superman, and let's say that he's got the book, right, the comic?
Yeah.
And actually, I'm really not familiar. Does that take place in New York City? Most of it?
Metropolis, I think.
Metropolis? Let's pretend it's New York.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Just for the sake.
It's pretty much New York, yeah.
Okay. For my example, let's pretend that it's New York, and so he's standing on top of the Chrysler building, right? And he does some cool stuff, and he flies down, and he beats up these bad guys, and he's super cool.
Yeah.
So from this comic, you got the part about New York, and that's factual. New York is a real city in the United States, and it's been there forever, and we can all agree that New York is a real city. But then you got, Superman, and I think we can agree that Superman, perhaps I can't prove Superman isn't real, but we can probably agree that he's probably not real.
Yeah.
So I guess my thing is, like, we got the book, and there's real elements in that book, but perhaps not all of the elements are the truth.
Well, when I say, okay, let me talk about that real quick. That example is, so when it's interesting, because when I say presuppose, I'm not saying believe it to be true. I'm saying pretend it's true for the sake of the argument.
Yes, I understand.
So for instance, in your argument, it's like an atheist wouldn't say, oh yeah, like New York just like we're pretending just New York exists. Yeah, we know New York exists, but they would be saying, why did Superman kill that person? So right there, they're presupposing, pretending Superman exists for the sake of the person who believes in Superman. So right there is my point with the God thing. If you presuppose Superman to exist, you have to presuppose his bulletproofness, he can fly. Otherwise, it's not really Superman.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean.
Right, cool.
And that's it's kind of I guess it's almost frustrating for me.
And tell me why.
I
don't mean to. I hope I don't like offend, like upset you or anything. Like, can you? Like, how come that's the case?
I was just about to explain it. Like, not to say that I didn't enjoy this conversation, because I did. I really, really did.
Same.
But the frustrating part for me is that this conversation almost was irrelevant. In a way.
And how come?
Because it's almost like we have to have a definitive whether God is real or not. And then once we get that definitive, we can have this conversation, and it makes more sense to have it after that point, but it also makes it irrelevant.
Well,
so
you could argue that too, but it kind of, even if God doesn't exist, it kind of shows, is the God of the Bible moral or not, whether he exists or not. You could argue, yeah, sure, but it kind of reflects the mind of a Christian in some way. Are they believing in whether God doesn't? Let's say God doesn't exist, right? Let's say you're.
Mm-hmm.
Is the mind of a Christian believing in some fictional tyrant, evil God, or are they believing in a God that is actually moral, that is fictional? So it kind of reflects the mind. So maybe it's not completely irrelevant, because it kind of reflects the mind of those who believe in him. And so I'm trying to justify my belief in him by saying that, and again, I don't just jump to this as my first argument. I try to look into the specific instances, but this argument is something that has to be mentioned because it's part of God's nature. That is contradictory for him to be anything else other than good. And if he is this good of the source of good, then his morality is like unarguable against, because it's just the condition of ontology, in other words.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, like what am I trying to say? Like, I know that not all, like some Christians will look at some of these Bible verses, like for example, the slavery one about beating them, especially in the southern United States, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
They would use that verse to justify slavery, to attempt to keep American slavery, and that was a very awful thing that they did.
They took it out of context because they obviously, I mean, I'm not saying that this should happen, but they obviously beat people way more than a tooth. They killed people. They tortured people. They just, that's like
Oh yeah.
That's like just using that verse, but not even following that verse. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, I totally agree, and that's like I understand that they took it out of context, like those specific people took it out of context.
Yeah.
I mean, I may not exactly agree with your argument to how it was to, like I understand that doesn't necessarily have a strong connection, or like you can't justify a connection. Like that might be one of the reasons, but I think it was more of like they saw it after the fact and they were going to do it no matter what. I don't think the Bible caused American slavery. I wouldn't ever claim that would be the case. That wasn't the case. But I guess the point I was trying to make was, like, a lot of Christians used that and they perverted the Bible and used it in very, very negative ways. But then there's a lot of Christians out there that look at the Bible and either, in my opinion, honestly, I don't think they interpret it correctly. But I'm glad they don't. I'm glad that they take some of the verses and kind of twist it and tweak it to what they want it to say. And what they want it to say, I agree with. And I think it is the correct way to live, I guess, to treat others, to have respect for others, to do what's best for the well-being of others. And I applaud that. And I'm glad that those people do that, and I'm glad they exist. And even though I might disagree that they're on their interpretation, but I'm glad that they're good people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying 100%.